Hello, everybody. Welcome to Expression Pass here on Boss Push Network. I'm your host, the enlightened, excited one. Joining me is the Zelda fan favorite. You guys know him. You guys know him. Please welcome Mr. David Nystrom. Hello, good sir.
Hello, how you doing?
Hi. We have a great discussion to have. So I posed this question to David, and I was excited that he was just like, "Oh, I gotta come on and talk about this one." So I am excited, and I asked David, should the Legend of Zelda series go back to numbers? If you guys realize that the Legend of Zelda and the Legend of Zelda 2, really pretty much 2, are really the only games that have a sequel number to them. Everything else that came after it has been like subtitles, like The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, Legend of Zelda: Skyward Sword. All of these, the rest of the games have become more of, they feel like sequels, or supposed to be sequels in different time, in different eras, but they are not numbers anymore. So in reality, if you are a person who goes by numbers, The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past isn't Zelda 3 because it doesn't have that 3 in it. And so I asked David, should they go back? David, break it down to us. What do you think of numbers in video games as a sequel?
So, my issue when I have numbers, the first game series that comes to mind is Final Fantasy.
Yes.
And so, a lot of people's probably first step into Final Fantasy, at least here in the West, was probably Final Fantasy 7. Or, there's a lot of people who love 6, who love 5, but you also have the different numberings from, the what order that they came out in Japan to the orders that they came out here. It changes, like, I think it's 1 through 4 are all different numbers in Japan.
Yes.
I'm not as up on that as I should be, but when I think about that series, when I was younger, I didn't know that, oh, you mean I don't have to play 1 through 6 to understand 7? I can just jump in and play, and I'm good to go. Oh, what about, well, now there's 8. What do I do what if I haven't played 7? That always was a put off to me when I was younger. Now, as an adult and as somebody who can Google whatever I need to do, if I don't know something, I can look up the answer and be like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. It's its own game. It's a standalone game. However, there's also the problem of, if you don't have a number on there, is somebody coming into this without having knowledge of what this is? Is this the first game? Is it the 25th game? I've just been playing Tales of Arise, and I was familiar. I had heard of the Tales of series before, but I didn't know until I booted up Tales of Arise that, oh wow, this franchise has been out for 25 years. Mm-hmm. This is a pretty established franchise. So I didn't know how far back that series went. Thinking in terms of Zelda, we can kind of eliminate that last factor. Everybody knows The Legend of Zelda. Everybody knows Link. Everybody knows Zelda. Everybody knows Ganon. These are icons in gaming. There's nobody coming to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 or whatever the heck it's going to be called, thinking this is only the second game in the series. They will know that there's more. They recognize that there's more. And I have a feeling that we'll talk a lot about this as this conversation goes on. With the sequel to Breath of the Wild, going back to numbers is I think, the right choice if they are making this the new canon going forward. And my thinking with that is Breath of the Wild was the reinvention of so much of Zelda. In the same way that the original Zelda was a reinvention of gaming in general. Up until then, it was, for the most part, with very rare exceptions, it was walk along the screen from left to right and jump, put another quarter in if you run out of lives, keep going, things like that. It wasn't you could move to this dungeon, save your progress, pick it up a week later and still be there. That kind of evolution it's not to that degree, I don't think, Breath of the Wild, but the idea of why it was that way is that level of evolution. And to make a sequel to that game, which you have explicitly called a sequel, is inherent in you want to reestablish this franchise, you want to reestablish this world. I think you need to use numbers to denotate that, to mark that, to say this is the beginning of something new, this is where it began, and this is where we're going from here. So roundabout way, yes, I think Zelda should go back to including a number, at least as long as they're going to continue this formula. When they want to reinvent again, when they want to go back to whatever, or they want to change it up, then they reset. And I think kind of an example of this is the Metroid series, where you have your mainline 2D Metroids, and you have your Metroid Prime series. Metroid Prime are numbered and subtitled. They have numbers and subtitles. Who's to say you can't do that? Who's to say you can't call the next Zelda game, even though it'd be an insanely long title, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, da 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 blah blah blah, whatever the subtitle is. Now you have a subtitle, but it becomes a second essentially franchise within the Zelda franchise. That's so my roundabout way of answering that question is yes, I think they should, as long as they're going to continue to innovate on this path that they're on with Breath of the Wild.
Right, because I think this is I want to say third reinvention of Breath of the Wild with the way that the game was designed, because of course you have, the original one, but everybody remember Ocarina of Time because you took the 2D sprite into 3D. Right. And then with that, not saying so much with Wind Waker, because Wind Waker was more art style than it was gameplay or anything, because it still, it still had this formula that the Ocarina games and Majora's Mask has did. But you look at Link Between Worlds that changed the formula also in a sense, because it was just like you are renting weapons before you actually can acquire them and go to any dungeon that you want. So they kind of did pre-open world, even though this is supposed to be a follow-up to a Link to the Past with Link Between Worlds.
Right.
And then you get Breath of the Wild, which is I wanted to say second. I mean, I probably misquoted. It's kind of like the third iteration, because it is open world, but it's truly open world. There's so much freedom in that game.
Oh yeah.
That it's just like it's more than just reinvents the wheel. Like, you get these shrines that are puzzles, and most of the dungeons in the Legend of Zelda games are puzzles. You don't really do that much combat. I mean, do some combat.
Yeah. Well, that was the entire dungeons were puzzles in Breath of the Wild. Yeah. That was while there were always puzzles within a dungeon, or sometimes the dungeon was kind of like a puzzle, and that you might have to knock down a central structure or pillars around the outside, things like that.
Yeah.
The dungeon itself being a puzzle had never been done to this level. The only exception to that I can think of is the Sky Keep at the end of Skyward Sword, where the entire dungeon was a giant sliding puzzle, and you had to move the rooms around and stuff. But outside of that, I can't think of any dungeon that was as literally the dungeon is a puzzle as the Divine Beasts in Breath of the Wild.
Correct. Yes. So when it comes to numbers for the Legend of Zelda series, it's kind of, I would say this, and now that I think about it, it's kind of hard to answer that question because of the placement. That's one thing about games that I hate that they do, that the sequel is a prequel to the first game. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, why are you going back? These characters that you may have killed off and stuff, I understand why you're trying to bring them back and trying to bring in the world, but it's just like, it doesn't feel right that you may a sequel, but it's supposed to actually start the whole series off. And there are some games that do that, and you just be like, what was the choice of doing that and
Right.
treating it like it's a flashback and stuff? I
Right.
think with the Legend of Zelda is that there's so many different timelines of the of Zelda, Link, and Ganon, or Ganondorf, depending on how you want to call it. There's so many timelines that it's kind of hard to depict what is the actual first one. We know now that I believe what Breath of the Wild is the first one, correct? Or no, Skyward Sword is.
Skyward Sword is the oldest story in the canon. Breath of the
Okay.
Wild is theoretically last, and it's not clear if it falls on any one of the three branches. There's a pretty popular theory that's called the Dragon Timeline, where basically all three timelines lead to the same inevitable point, and that is Breath of the Wild. That's one of the leading theories. There's theories for placing it on each of the three timelines.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and this is, I wish they would just say, yeah, it's on this timeline. Here you go. It's done. Move on. Wipe their hands. Be done with it. But I know they won't, or at least not until they put out, another book 20 years down the road, like they did when they released Hyrule Historia. I think that what they have done is they have said, look, we made all these great games, fantastic. We're moving on to a whole new chapter. And I think going forward, we're going to see the traditional Zeldas, if you will, everything pre Breath of the Wild, be referred to as kind of in the sense of what Star Wars did when they retconned so much of the universe when Disney bought them. You have this is what used to be. This is not what they call it now. The Legends, the legacy stuff of Star Wars. I don't remember what they called it. All the original expanded universe stuff. They took that and said, sure, that can exist. It's over here. This is what we're doing now. This is now what we're calling canon. And that was what they built the sequel trilogy off of, was all the new canon and all the new stuff. And that's what irritated a lot of classic fans. I think that's what they're doing with Zelda, is they're taking, here's our original set of games. This is what we started with. This is what it all was. It's fantastic. We love it. It's, we'll keep re-releasing it because you'll keep buying it. We'll keep putting it on virtual console because you'll keep paying for it. but going forward, Breath of the Wild is canon.
Yes.
And we're just going to go from there. And I think that is smart business as far as storytelling business, to say, look, we're evolving. We have made a whole new game. We've made a whole new world. This is going to be what we explore in. But I also think that by doing that, I don't like it because I like those stories. I want those stories.
Yes.
Doing a numbering system, to keep us on that main topic here, doing a numbering system on these titles going forward would be a way to establish them in their own canon, to say, like, this is that. And to that effect, so if we get Breath of the Wild sequel comes out, the sequel to Breath of the Wild comes out, and it is called Breath of the Wild 2, Return of Ganon, something like that, then we get Breath of the Wild 3, and eventually you get your actual Breath of the Wild is the main header, or they keep the Legend of Zelda as the main header, but it becomes, the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild series, Volume 4, Volume 5, with subtitles, things like that. I can see that happening. I don't like it. I don't necessarily think that's the way they should go with it, but I don't work at Nintendo. I don't get paid by Nintendo. and for 150 years, is it, Nintendo's been doing business? So
yes.
Okay.
and I think Anuma and the team know what they're going for. Know that if we don't have a number system, because I feel like they're making the Legend of Zelda just like books. They went about it like books. Like, you can find the timeline on how that goes, but each game represents its own book. It represents its own adventure, and I think
if every book was written by a different author, is what it feels like.
Yes,
but written by the author's children, or their grandson and so forth, because it's okay, that's all still there, but something's different. Something every time, it's this, they tweak something. some, like the art style or like just one gameplay mechanic. And so it feels like, you're right, like books, but being written by different people who are close, friendly, related. I mean, now we all know it is the same people over and over again, just trying to expand their horizons, create new games, be broader inventors of gaming and things like that. But I think, yes, I like that analogy. They're writing books, yes.
Because because of like if you look at Kobe Tecmo doing Hyrule Warriors, that is kind of like fan fiction in a
Yes.
sense, you know.
The
But
OG Hyrule Warriors, especially.
yes, but Capcom is like Capcom feels like miniature books, and not so much like choose your adventure or anything, but they feel like short stories, but done correctly.
Well, see, and that's the thing. The Capcom games were an experiment. They were
Mhm.
Nintendo approached them, said, "Hey," or I don't remember if Nintendo approached them or they approached Nintendo. One of them basically said, "We want to remake the original Legend of Zelda." That's why if you look at the map in Oracle of Seasons, it is the same map essentially. The map of Holodrum is the same map as the original Legend of Zelda because it was
Mhm.
originally engineered as a remake, and then plans fell through, plans changed, and they eventually were supposed to make 3 games. One got scrapped, and then we only got Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages. But you're right. Those 2 games, and then eventually the Minish Cap. That trilogy, those 3 games are these, yes, the short stories in this giant anthology that is Zelda.
Yeah, because I wonder about Minish Cap. I always wondered where does it fit in kind of the Legend of Zelda series. It's because I think it was I know I think it was just it felt weird being on the GBA, and I love the GBA. Trust me, I played Minish Cap on GameCube, and thank you Nintendo for the Game Boy Advance adapter. That thing was heavy. Me and Corey talk about that thing so much. He actually found his disc to his. I need to
The,
find mine because my
the Game
adapt
Boy player is amazing. I love
oh,
that thing.
love it, and I feel like we talk about Zelda and we talk about all the other series, but Minish Cap gets brought up so much, and I always wonder, I'm like, where does it fit in? Because it really feels like a standalone game, and there's no connection to any of the Legend of Zeldas. But
Well, the
it's
weird
such a great game.
Oh, it's a great game. But the weird thing about the Minish Cap is that it was essentially done as an origin story for the Four Swords. Because when you get to the end, the Picori blade gets forged into the Four Sword, and
Hmm.
that's how you defeat Vati. But the other 2 Four Swords games come. I don't remember where the original Four Swords comes, but Four Sword Adventures comes at the end of one of the child timeline, sometime after Twilight Princess. It doesn't make any sense. Those 3 games are just so spread out across the map of the Zelda anthology that it just doesn't make any sense.
Because
Because
Four
the
Swords was
Minish
on Game Boy Advance, right?
Four Swords was originally, yes, on Game Boy Advance as an add-on when they ported A Link to the Past to the Game Boy Advance when they were doing their retro release for the
Okay.
GBA. That was like a bonus add-on that was accompanied to it, but you had to have 4 players with link cables to play it.
Right.
Then eventually it got a re-release for the anniversary edition on the 3DS, and you could play that wirelessly with people, and they added a solo campaign to it as well, where you could play it as one player.
So the GameCube version is
The
at
game the GameCube version is Four Sword Adventures, or Four Swords Adventures, which was a separate game. That was its own standalone game.
yes.
This one, hang on, I can reach it without knocking things over. That one.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
And I love that game. That is a great game. But that is also a multiplayer game. But you have to have Game Boy Advances and Game Boy Link cables to port into the GameCube.
Yes. Come on, Nintendo. You guys should get that together. And
At
because I
the
would
fun.
oh as just if they did like, hey, we got this game for $9.99 on the eShop with our net code being better, online functionality, you can play with your Joy-Cons, you can do split
E-
screen.
Even
Pro
with even with their terrible netcode, it would be fun to play.
Yes. And because I think people will buy it because I think it's a game that really not a lot of people try because of the setup on the GameCube.
Well, and
Uh,
everybody saw the Four Swords and thought it was, oh, it's a multiplayer game. I can't play it solo. You can play it solo. I didn't have a lot of friends as a kid. Like, well, okay, let me rephrase this. I didn't have friends who had Game Boys and loved Zelda like I did. So it was hard to. I didn't have anybody to play with. I didn't care. I played it by myself every time. I would play through that game again. I did recently. I played through it a few years ago because we did over at Zelda Dungeon we did a Champions Cast episode on Four Sword Adventures, and we talked about it and went into it and talked about it from that first person perspective because there is actually a really cool story in it. It actually is one of the first cases where we see Ganondorf, the man, reincarnated, and they actually call it out. Yeah, his name is Ganondorf. He's the leader of the Gerudo. He got reincarnated. He stole the Trident of Power, and now he's trying to kill everybody.
oh yes, because oh man, this and yeah. I'm sorry, everybody, because I'm just amazed. I'm excited for this topic because I I I was thinking about it and I was just like, man, A Link to the Past was the next level for the Zelda franchise going forward. And it was still 2D and it's such a great game. It has a lot of iconic moments, but to see on the outside that it's known as Zelda 3, but we consider it as Link to the Past,
Right.
like how did the number I wonder when did the number system drop? Did Miyamoto or Numa or whoever was like in charge of it producing it or whatever, I wonder when they made the decision to be like, you know what, we don't need numbers, we want to be able to tell these different timelines, and with these timelines and with these characters, because I'm still baffled about the Triforce.
Right.
I'm baffled at the fact that it was eight pieces of the Triforce.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was still eight pieces in Zelda 2.
So the original Zelda, there were only two Triforces. There was the Triforce of Power and the Triforce of Wisdom. And as horrible as it is, the animated series does a good job of explaining that. Evil Ganon Wizard holds the Triforce of Power. Well, the Princess Zelda and Hyrule hold the Triforce of Wisdom. And essentially, it's those two pieces. That was it in the original Zelda. The third Triforce piece came along in Zelda 2, Adventure of Link. That was in the manual, and it's the first time you see the actual incarnation of the complete Triforce, because in the manual it's on the back of Link's hand, and Impa is explaining to him that, oh, there's a third piece of the Triforce of Courage, and that's kind of what the quest in Zelda 2 is a little backwards from all the other ones, because instead of going to temples to retrieve things, you're actually going to these palaces and placing gems in statues, I think is what it was, is how it worked. And in an effort to reawaken the sleeping Princess Zelda.
Right, because in the first one, weren't you collecting the seven pieces or eight pieces of the Triforce?
You were collecting the Triforce of Wisdom, which had been broken into 8 pieces. Yes.
See, and that's where I got lost about the Triforce, on why it was weird to be like, wait a minute, there you collect the Triforce pieces, and then when I see Ocarina of Time, and the three goddesses or the three fairies went through a Triforce and broke it into 3, I'm like, wait a minute, I felt like they reconned the whole thing with the Triforce. I was weirded out about that. I'm like, wait a minute, this is not right.
Ocarina of Time did do a lot of retconning, and a lot of people have, and I've noted it as well. Ocarina of Time took a lot of A Link to the Past story and reused it. The entire idea of, okay, you did 3 levels, you get pendants, and A Link to the Past, you got the 3 pendants, pendant of power, courage, and wisdom. And Ocarina of Time, you get the 3 spiritual stones, which they attribute to different elements. You have the forest, fire, and water, but really it's the same thing, the representational of courage, wisdom, and power. Um, and then then you have the Dark World in A Link to the Past, but you also have the adult timeline in Ocarina of Time, and a lot of people refer to that as the Dark World. And there's a lot of similarities that the two stories share.
Mm-hmm.
The idea for that when they made Ocarina of Time, from what I understand, is that they intended it to be similar because they wanted it to tell essentially the prologue to A Link to the Past, which talks about the Sealing War. Since then, that's become its own. The Sealing War is now what is known as the Downfall timeline. That happens if Link is to fall in battle. That's how you get the Downfall timeline, and that's what led to the Sealing War and the sages of that in that time and that story, sealing Ganon away. But if we were to try to number those, then it would be, if you go down the timeline as it is shown, Zelda 1 would be Skyward Sword, and 2 would be the Minish Cap, 3 would be Ocarina of Time, or Four Swords, the one that was the add-on for A Link to the Past.
Uh-huh.
I think that might still come between them, but then Ocarina of Time would be like Zelda 3 or Zelda 4. And then from there you would have all sorts of nightmares because you'd be trying to figure out, okay, well, Wind Waker is the direct sequel to Ocarina of Time. So is Majora's Mask. So is A Link to the Past. 3A, 3B, 3C.
Because I think all of them are happening with. I'm assuming they're all happening around the same time. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask.
Yeah,
kind of happen back to back.
Yeah, you start getting into the multiverse discussion of, well, now I have a link here. Now I have a link here, and that is where I think one of the possibilities for. And I've actually talked about this. There's a guy, Usmania. He and I had a discussion one time on a show about the possibility that Hyrule Warriors, the original one, not Age of Calamity, but the original Hyrule Warriors, being canon. The idea for that is that it crosses all three timelines. There are characters from all three timelines in that game. So theoretically, you slap that at the end of one of the whichever timeline. I think it actually would canonically fall at the end of the child timeline. So sometime after Twilight Princess, Majora's Mask, all those. And you allow these other characters to come in through Hyrule Warriors. That then creates a world that is possible for everything that happens in Breath of the Wild to be explained away. all the contradictions of, hey, we have Zora and we have Rito. Well, Wind Waker told us that the Rito were evolved from the Zora because they couldn't swim in the waters because the water produced no life. It was a dead ocean. They couldn't live there, so they had to leave. So that we have an inaccuracy because they both exist in Breath of the Wild. That factor is explained away because of the original Hyrule Warriors. And this is, like you said, it's fan fiction. It's pure fan fiction. That's the only thing that makes sense. And so somewhere along the way, I think somebody at Nintendo kind of had this realization that we don't know what we're doing anymore with our story. This story, this piece of this title, this property that we gave to Koei Tecmo Team Ninja has created this loophole for us. Let's use it.
Yes, and I think when the first Hyrule Warrior came out, with this original ideas and having all of these characters, it was more of how do we get our Dynasty Warrior formula to fit the Legend of Zelda series. Right. Once we get that fit, then we're more able to focus on the gameplay, but we got to create a scenario with that, because I love Hyrule Warriors and I love Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. I thought that story was really good in Hyrule Warriors, like the characters and definitely the music in that game. I love the music in Hyrule Warriors. It's so good. Trust me, we're going to have a different discussion about the Legend of Zelda music, because we was talking on Power Block this week about Nintendo music. I asked like, is Nintendo music historic and iconic? Is like Sony and Microsoft music isn't. And when you look for covers or you look for mashups and mixes and stuff, you'll definitely find Legend of Zelda. Mashup and a lot of covers and people even doing jazz numbers and
Oh, yeah.
orchestrated stuff, like, and it's so good to see that. And definitely when we the concerts, live concerts, like it was always packed. I'm lucky I was able to get a ticket to go see
Yep.
both of them. It was There's something about the Legend of Zelda music that, how is this happening? Like, how is this just something that when you listen to it, you're transported into that world. Whether you're relaxing, whether you're writing, whether you just feel like you kind of need like an energy, or because there's some jaunty music in The Legend of Zelda that we don't talk about. That it's just
Sure.
really good, but it's just something about that music, and depending on which game you play, it takes you in.
Yeah. No, and I don't, I can't explain what it is. I mean, yeah, I could speculate as to, why some things are iconic, and that there are people who have done a marvelous job of explaining,
Hmm.
scientifically, like through music theory, explaining why this song is so good, and things like that. But I mean, I think there's only one word that can describe it, and that's magic.
Yes.
The original Zelda theme was written the night before it shipped, because they wanted to use a song, the song that they wanted to use. They found out that they had been planning to use, found out like the night before that it was still under a copyright license. It hadn't passed the date where it had gone into public domain to where they could use it. It was a piece of classical music. I don't remember which one it was, but it was. They found out last minute, basically, like, oh, we can't use this anymore. What are we supposed to do? And that night, Koji Kondo sat down and wrote the theme that we know. Dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
Wrote that the night before it was due, basically,
He
and
is
it's become beyond iconic.
he is just a magical music artist, like
Yeah,
musician, like uh, maybe that may be a discussion to have just about him and his history with music and all the arrangements he's done and songs that when you hear it, you be like, okay, I know that series, I know where this part is at. And I
right.
guess that, like, going back to the conversations, just like even his music feels like, if it's fitting for that book, whatever that game is. It just sounds fitting. And I think when I go to Breath of the Wild and I just hear the intro music, I'm like, man, even this is relaxing. Even this takes me in and teleports me. Even when I'm running through the fields and it's like no sound, and then I get close to one of the monsters and stuff, and they do just like
Dun,
their
dun,
little,
dun, 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 dun.
yeah. It's just like you say, it's magic
Yep.
and
Well,
everything.
like I think one of the songs that comes to mind is, and this is my son was just by some booted this up just the other day. Skyward Sword on the Wii. For those of you who don't remember, the Wii had a thing called loading screens.
Yes.
But when you would click on the icon on the menu, and it would bring up the, like the splash screen before you'd hit start, it has this very iconic soft version of the Ballad of the Goddess that plays, but it starts out with this dong, and then it kind of dun, and does that light strum dun, 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 but it's really quiet and understated, and it's just so beautiful. And I mean, like when he started it up, I'm just like, huh. I just, my shoulders relaxed, I let out a breath, and it was, this is fantastic. This is, I love this. This is beautiful. And it's, and then, yeah, the discussion on Zelda music could go on for hours and hours and hours and hours.
Trust me, I'm gonna have you on for that one. I'm gonna have to get the. I'm like, look, Zelda Dungeon, y'all gotta come on, expansion pass. We gotta talk about this music because Kanji Kondo, he's almost, to me, I don't give him enough props, but I'm like, you are on the level of Miyamoto. You are on the level of Iwata and other creators at Nintendo because, like,
the series
you.
wouldn't the
Oh, go
series
ahead.
wouldn't exist without him. Like, and then
Yes.
that's not to say you could replace him with somebody else, and that's not to say that the others aren't part of it. They collectively, without any one of those pieces, you want the Triforce, it's Kondo, Miyamoto, and Iwata.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Eiji Aonuma now, I suppose. But you have your Triforce.
Yeah. And
That is
the one director for the Yoshi games, and I cannot think of his name, because he worked with Miyamoto on Super Mario also. And I would because kind of want to give him his props too. It's just, man, yeah. So we're gonna bring this one to a close. I kind of, so to answer the question that I proposed to you personally, I don't want them to go back to numbers. I now having this conversation, now thinking about it, definitely changing my mind. I think seeing it as these games are books and seeing as their own adventure, um, it's just I think the number system wouldn't work for it anymore. Like I love. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I agree, but I also wouldn't dislike it if they, like I said at the beginning, if they're going to continue this thread, if they're going to say that Breath of the Wild is our new canon, if this is like, if it's a full stop, this is where we're starting, this is now game one, essentially. Breath of the Wild's sequel, let it be Breath of the Wild 2, and then have a subtitle, and then 3, go ahead and make a trilogy, and then close that book, and then go to something different. Or you do, like I mentioned, what Metroid does, where you have Metroid Dread is called Metroid 5. That is
Yes.
Metroid 5. Metroid Dread is Metroid 5. Well, what about Metroid Prime? Metroid Prime is Metroid Prime. Metroid Prime 2 is 2. Echoes is 2. Corruption is 3. That has its own timeline. Eventually, Metroid Prime 4. Who knows when, but eventually. You have these separate, essentially separate naming titles, naming schemes. Let that happen in Zelda too. If you're going to go this route, fine. Then you can give these games names. There's still The Legend of Zelda. It's still The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 3, but with other names attached to it. It's a lot more of a mouthful than Metroid Prime, but it is okay if you're going to continue this thread. If you're going to be going back to more traditional Zeldas, you continue to name them just the subtitle. If you're going to start going back and forth, I don't know. Do you need the numbers then? I don't know. And again, I don't have a good answer to that.
So I think with Breath of the Wild, I think I don't know how the whole Zelda community feels, or just Zelda fans, or just gamers, and whether they play Nintendo or not. But no of the Legend of Zelda, and seeing the success of Breath of the Wild, I know that there are a lot of people who just like, what, there's so many theories and stories that they can add and people have been making, that they need this series to be a trilogy. They need Breath of the Wild to literally end on a 3. Because of exploring that world, and people still exploring and finding stuff, it produced so many possibilities, and 2 might do the same thing. And it may lead to be like, what, I'm fine if there is a conclusion, but there is also, a lead on to, yeah, there's still something there. We haven't finished telling the story, and that's a 3. And I think it's going to be when that game comes out, and Nintendo's and the number of them, they gotta be focused, they gotta pay attention, because people are going to be talking about this game, and they're gonna want a 3 if they lead this off where here's our ending, but we got something hidden here.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them tell half a story, which is more story than they put in the first Breath of the Wild. That's just my little dig at Breath of the Wild. It would not surprise me to see them tell half a story in Breath of the the sequel to Breath of the Wild, and then tell another story in the trilogy, and create this arc of 3 games where one is your foundation. And again, to kind of equate this to Star Wars, when you think about the Star Wars movies,
Mhm.
A New Hope, I'm talking original trilogy here, A New Hope feels like a complete story. Yes, there's still some threads, like what happens to Vader? What is the Empire gone? But it feels like a complete story. You have this arc from farm boy to hero. You have the full heroes arc with Luke in there. But then you have Empire and Jedi, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, which are more intertwined into each other than they are to the first one. They're all picking up threads from the first one, yes, but
Yes.
you could say that Star Wars: A New Hope stands on its own, and Empire and Jedi are much more dependent upon each other. I feel
Well,
like that's what you're going to see with a Breath of the Wild trilogy if we get it, where yep, one was a complete story. Oh, we have a couple of threads that can be picked up elsewhere. Yeah, okay, but for the most part, it's a complete story. You have your hero waking up, knows his destiny, fulfills his destiny. Princess is saved, Hyrule is safe. Hooray! Now we have something bigger, badder, something darker, or something more dramatic, encapsulating that can't be told in one 40-hour game. It's going to need 2 giant games to fill out the full story. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's what we see.
yeah, because I feel like Breath of the Wild 2 doesn't need DLC. I mean, it could do DLC if it wants to, but I'm
Sure.
like, I think Anuma's just like, okay, we've written this story and it's too good to put into this game. Let's do a 3. And,
Yeah.
use the same process that they did to make 2. Because I feel like, and I don't know if what you think about this. And I got this question and then one more question. And then we're going to go. Sorry. My question to you is, do you think that the sales of Breath of the Wild and Hyrule Warriors are going to jump when we get an actual name and date for this game?
Uh, Jump.
Because people want to prepare. I think it's almost just like the Metroid and the first Breath of the Wild, where people were just like they were playing the old games. They were playing Wind Waker. They were playing
Yeah.
Twilight Princess. Like they were preparing themselves, but to get ready for it too, and people has been away from the world. They may go through I'm like, okay, let me finally pick up Edge of Calamity and play through it and see what that is about. Okay, I found out what the story. Oh, go ahead.
I think the install base on the original Breath of the Wild at this point is there. I don't think there's many holdouts waiting for. Gee, I wonder if the sequel's ever coming. I don't know if I want to get into the series or not. I don't think we would see a huge jump. I think you'd see a small bump. I think it might move it. It might move. A couple 100,000. It might move a few. It might move a few points on the scale, but not anything significant. I at least for Breath of the Wild. For Age of Calamity, maybe. Because they have numbers to give still. They have
Yes.
There's room for those to continue to go up. I think Breath of the Wild, because it's like I said, because the install base is already there. I don't think you can see much of a jump on there. I think obviously Mario Kart 8 dominates the Switch, but what does everybody else? What is the game that everybody else has? Animal Crossing and Breath of the Wild. The 3 games that everybody has for their Switch, just about, is Mario Kart, Animal Crossing, Breath of the Wild.
I think if they did like if they did like $29.99 for digital sale for Breath of the Wild and $29.99 for Hyrule Warriors, or even do a combo pack, you get both games for $60 for all this DLC, or even $70. Nintendo do additionally.
Yeah, go for 70.
Yeah, and they did that as a bundle, and they'd be like, okay, we're releasing this a little ways out before we do Hyrule Warrior, Breath of the Wild 2. I
Yeah.
think people would jump on it because now they're just like, okay, I just got my Switch. I missed these games. It's still $60 each of them in the store, but this is a good deal because now I can play it digitally. It's on my system. I get these gold coins. Don't know what they're used for, but I get them for later on for the eShop. And people like maybe it hit sales like a good. I feel like a good 200,000 copies if they do that. You know.
I could see
Um,
if yeah, I could see that much. Yeah,
and
especially if there's a sale bundled in. Yeah.
Yeah. So my last question I want to ask you, and then we're gonna wrap up, is even though it doesn't deal with the main topic that we have, I kind of want I don't know if anyone ever asked you why has Link never been a king in the
Why has
Zelda
Link never
games?
been the king?
Yes. So I guess it's just like once you finish a Legend of Zelda game and you're going through a different timeline, you would think that Link and Zelda will come together to produce the next Link or next Zelda, the next child. And I always has anyone ever asked you that on why it's never happened? Or do you have a
No.
theory about it?
So I have theories. So one of the things that I've always found fascinating, and this is attached to that topic, is Zelda is never addressed as Queen Zelda
Hmm.
anywhere that I can think of. It's always Princess Zelda. I'm sure you can chalk that up to it's the fantasy trope. The hero knight must save the damsel in distress, the princess, whatever. But there's more to it than that. Because there are games where there is no king. There are instances where the king is dead, and it's very clearly so. But Zelda is still called princess. She's still the princess. She's still Princess Zelda, Princess of Destiny, Princess of Light, whatever moniker they give her. But she's still always the princess. Why is she never addressed as queen? And I don't have a good answer to that. I actually just theorized this a while ago in my story. In my story, the Arrow Without a Hero, and I can't believe it took this long to plug it. uh, uh, I addressed the issue that Princess Zelda from Ocarina of Time, the characters in that story pass her gravestone at one point, and Princess Zelda and during the time of my story, brings up that thought. Why is she still called princess? And the character, there's an elderly Sheikah woman who is kind of her traveling companion slash mentor, and she just kind of explains to her that that was her title. She took pride in the title of Princess of Destiny. Yes, she was the queen when her father died, but but she took pride in knowing that her title in history would be Princess of Destiny. So maybe that's something along those lines. Maybe it's just a matter of this is the title I was given, this is the title I will hold. Link being courageous, brave, true, and probably humble, typically a trait that goes along with lots of heroes, doesn't need that recognition, doesn't want that recognition, doesn't want that thrust upon him. So therefore, maybe he just doesn't feel the need to. And that's assuming that he and Zelda get together. There's only one, maybe two games where that's really kind of like pushed, and that's Skyward Sword. And if you get into it, the original Zelda and Zelda 2, there's a kind the ending of that, you have the typical curtain falling down and Link and Zelda kind of embracing. But Skyward Sword, it is in theory that Zelda becomes the queen. Her father probably, you don't know what happens to her father past the end of the game. You could assume that he became one of the ancient sages because of his name. It's very much connected to Kapora from Ocarina of Time, who
Hmm.
is Rauru, the Sage of Light. But you could make the argument that Link in Skyward Sword does become King of Hyrule, as in the first king of Hyrule, because that is where it ends. It ends with them founding Hyrule, essentially. And
Yes.
that was a game that I always wanted to see too. Was give me a direct sequel to Skyward Sword where we colonize and form Hyrule. Let's see that. Let's see them create Hyrule, come together, and that would be just awesome. Get to bring Groose back. Who doesn't
I
love Groose?
I really wonder how Hyrule's going to look in the future of the series.
Mm-hmm.
You
Well,
know,
looking at the future, Breath of the Wild, the sequel to Breath of the Wild, there's no king. Zelda is the highest ranking royal member. Ergo, she should be queen at this point. Are we going to
yes,
call her? Granted, they didn't call her. You very rarely hear her called Princess Zelda, other than in a few instances. For the most part, they kind of pulled that curtain back a little bit and just call her Zelda a lot of times in that game, especially, well, I guess more so, less so in Age of Calamity. There's a lot of reference of Princess Zelda there, but that takes on a whole different timeline too, because she still is princess, king is still alive, all that fun stuff.
yes, that is
but
true.
but the idea that in the sequel to Breath of the Wild, there's no king. Zelda should be queen. Will we see her ascend to that throne? Will there even be a kingdom of Hyrule at that point? Because it's in so much disarray. Everybody's kind of off doing their own thing. Back to the question of why don't we see Link with that title? Because I think there's very few instances where that's applicable, and the ones where it is applicable, we see the curtain fall on the story before that would really have to be a thing. So
Yeah, and I
yeah,
kind of
my
want,
theory.
and I kind of feel like the Triforce may play something in this. Uh, but yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, thank you, David. Do you want to go ahead and plug where people can find you?
Sure. You can find me. I'm most active over on Twitter. If you want to follow just me, I'm at DaveWayne09. If you want to follow just my Zelda story, it's at Zelda Tewa, which is ZeldaTewah. And that is just for my story, The Arrow Without a Hero, which, for the quick 5-second synopsis, is the story of what happens after Ocarina of Time, before the Great Flood that is talked about in the prologue to The Wind Waker. And actually, just on this coming Friday, a week from, so on the 13th, whatever next Friday is, not time date this video or audio, whichever one, the 11th, February 11th, the 50th part of The Arrow Without a Hero will be going out on ZeldaDungeon.net as part of their Fanfiction Friday, and we are just about to the halfway point of the entire story. So anybody has been keeping up with it, reading it over on there, we are nearing halfway, because I've had people comment before on the story like, how long is this? And I'm like, well, if it keeps going the way it is, it'll probably be around 130 some parts. So we're just hitting 50 now. I'm actually excited about that. I'm wondering if I'm going to do anything for it. I don't know. I might try to do a live reading over on my Zelda my Arrow Without a Hero Discord channel. I might do a live reading. I don't know yet. I haven't had enough time to think about it, but because it came up on me fast. But yeah, so that's where you can find me. And as I mentioned, some of my stuff is always being posted over on ZeldaDungeon.net, so you can find me there too.
All right. You guys can find me on Twitter at that retro code. You can check out more of Expression Pass early access by joining us on Patreon. You can go to Patreon I think it's Patreon/Boss Rush Network. I think it is.
I think if you just search Boss Rush on Patreon, it'll come up.
It'll
That's
come
what
up.
I did.
Okay. If not, go to bossrush.com. bossrush.net, and you'll be able to find it there also. I still gotta get these plugs and stuff down. You can find more of our content on bossrush.net and on our YouTube page, bossrush.net. Boss Rush Network. You can find me on Twitter, like I said, at that retro code. You can check out Nintendo Power Block on Mondays live at 7:30, 8:30 Central. Crossroads on Tuesdays at 7:30, 8:30 Central. Boss Rush Podcast on Wednesdays. Arsenal X on Sundays at 8:30, 9:30 Central. Boss Rush is at 8:30, 9:30 Central. Check all the content there. check our writings and everything. Everybody, have a great week. Have a great weekend. Thank you, David, for joining me for this expansion pass. It was a
My
good,
pleasure.
such a great discussion to have about Zelda. With that, everybody,
Absolutely.
we'll see. Yes, we'll see you next time, everybody, on Expansion Pass. Bye.